بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
الحمد لله نستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أما بعد. So this is the Sahaba program, the Tajweed Theory Course 2025 inshallah. So as you know, in the Sahaba program you have your memorization that needs to be completed, the daily tasks, etc. And then you also have other lessons such as tafsir and fiqh, aqidah, usul tafsir, and we also have Tajweed. So this will be the Tajweed theory course. So our course overview, there's 3 levels to our Tajweed theory course. So in theory level 1, we will be covering number 1, introduction to the science of Tajweed. Number 2, isti'adha and bismillah. Number 3, makharij, al-laqab, and sifat of the letters. Number 4, rules of nun sakina and tanween. Number 5, rules of mim sakina. And number 6, rules of mad. So this will all be under level 1. And that's for theory level 2. Then we shall be covering, inshaAllah, rules of tafkhim and tarqiq, rules of idgham and relationship between letters. Number 3, rules of stopping and starting. And number 4, important points of benefit, which will be covering some important rules and advanced points and rules and certain words in the Quran that are recited in a different way. And then we have theory level 3, where we will be doing an introduction to the 10 qira'at and also of the 10 qira'at bi'idhnillah. So theory level 1, then let's begin. Bismillah. So under here, as I mentioned before, number 1, we have an introduction to the science of Tajweed. Number 2, isti'adha and basmalah. Number 3, makharij, al-laqab, and sifat of the letters. Number 4, rules of nun sakina and tanween. Number 5, rules of mim sakina. And number 6, rules of mad. So firstly, the science of Tajweed. So the linguistic definition of Tajweed, it is the verbal noun of jawwada, which means to make better. Tajweed is to reach the limits in perfection and improvement. And Tajweed technically or legally means, meaning within the science of Tajweed, so you have the linguistic definition of what it means in the Arabic language, the literal meaning of the word that any Arab will understand, and then the specific meaning when it comes to the science of Tajweed. So technically, it means giving every letter its rights and dues in terms of articulation point, which is a makharij, characteristics, which is sifat, stopping and starting, which is waqf and wasl, without stiffness or haphazardness. So at Tajweed in Arabic, إعطاء كل حرف حقه ومستحقه مخرجا وصفة وقفا وابتداء من غير تكلف ولا تعسف. So the science of Tajweed explores how to pronounce letters, being concerned with their articulation points, meaning the makharij, and characteristics, meaning sifat, and what occurs to them of different rules, and what is connected to this during stopping, starting, continuing, and finishing off recitation. So the history of Tajweed. Writings about Tajweed appeared around 200 Hijri. Now, you're probably all aware that the original way that the Quran was taught and passed down from the Prophet ﷺ was orally. So there was no such thing as, for example, the technical terms such as fakunna, mad, etc., idgham, aqlab, these words. So these words exist in the Arabic language, so these words have their literal meanings, but technically in the science of Tajweed, these words were not used yet in these ways. So while all of this was being done practically in theory, these terms had not developed yet in terms of use in this particular way. So, for example, as we will cover later, we have the hadith of Ibn Mas'ud, where someone came and recited to him the verse in Surah At-Tawbah, إِنَّمَا الصَّدَقَاتُ لِلْفُقَرَاءِ وَالْمَسَاكِينِ. So he recited that as لِلْفُقَرَاءِ وَالْمَسَاكِينِ. So he didn't do the stretch, the med there. Now, Ibn Mas'ud did not say to him that you didn't do the med over here and the full count med, do it like this. He said to him, this is not how the Prophet ﷺ taught me how to recite this. So the man asked that how did the Prophet ﷺ teach you to recite this? And Ibn Mas'ud demonstrated إِنَّمَا الصَّدَقَاتُ لِلْفُقَرَاءِ وَالْمَسَاكِينِ. So it was all by demonstration. Okay, practically the Prophet ﷺ reciting to the Sahaba copying him, reciting after him like this. Now when it came to the documentation of Tajweed, so writing in general appeared around 200 Hijri. So originally it was the documentation of the Arabic language itself. And you probably all heard of the famous story of Abu al-Aswad al-Du'ali. He was the first person to write some document, some Arabic rules. And so, for example, they requested of him the different narrations. So one narration states that he was requested to write some documents, some Arabic rules down, and he didn't want to do that. He didn't see the need or whatever it was. And then one night he was with his daughter and she was looking at the stars and she said, "Oh my father, ma ajmalu samai." This basically, what she meant to say is how beautiful the sky is. But the way she said it, now in Arabic, if those are familiar, just the endings, which are known as the i'rab, the last harakas of the letters, play an extremely important role in the role of the words. And so it can completely change the meaning depending on just the endings. So the way she said it, she said, "Ma ajmalu as-sama'i." And this meaning means what is the most beautiful thing in the sky. Even though what she meant was how beautiful the sky is. She wanted to express this, that, oh, the sky is so beautiful. But the way she said it was asking a question, what's the most beautiful thing of the sky? And so her father replied, "An-nujum, the stars." And so then she responded, "Oh, my father, I didn't mean that. I meant to say, you know, how beautiful the sky is." And then he said to her, "Then you should have said, ma ajmala as-sama," like that. So then he realized if his own daughter's making this simple grammar mistake, then there is a need to document the rules of Arabic grammar. And the reason for this was in the time of the fourth Khalifa Ali radiallahu anhu. And by this time, as we know, Islam had spread far and wide to the non-Arabs, and many non-Arabs had entered into Islam. And it's been a few decades now since the Prophet ﷺ passed away. The non-Arabs had entered Islam, and so there was a mixing depth, as is normal when you have the new generation growing up in a mix of cultures of people that don't speak original pure Arabic. So then there is, and that's what leads to the language being distorted or getting mixed up, or foreign words and things entering foreign grammar, or the original language being lost in some way or not known, especially to the youth, like he noticed in his daughter's mistake, like that. And so then, on the request of Ali radiallahu anhu, the Khalifa, he basically he wrote down, he documented some Arabic grammar rules. And then after that, there were others who documented the language as well. And further down we have Al-Khalil bin Ahmed al-Farahidi, and then his student Sibawayh. And what they basically, when they were documenting the original language, what they did was basically they documented everything in one place. So they documented the letters, the Arabic letters, and they documented all the grammar rules. And along with that, they documented certain rules that were related to pronunciation. So there was everything, the whole of the language altogether was documented. And this is what happened in around 200 Hijri. And so it was only, amongst all of these, the Arabic language as a whole being documented, so you have obviously the parts that are related to pronunciation, which later became the rules of Tajweed. But these were all together as part of the Arabic language as a whole. It was only later, in around 400 Hijri, by someone called Abu Muzahim al-Khafani, who wrote a poem which is known as al-Khafaniya, which is when Tajweed became an independent style. So he was the first to write a poem about just the rules of Tajweed. So he took out extracted from the Arabic language, just those rules directly related to pronunciation, which was basically Tajweed. And originally, the more common phrase for Tajweed was Husnul Adab at that time in the past. Okay, so only now we refer to it more commonly as Tajweed. So that is a brief history of Tajweed. Now, the ruling of Tajweed, in terms of the theory, learning all of the theory, the theoretical terms and everything that have that developed. So these developed back in the past, in that time in the first few generations of the Salaf. Okay, so now all of the theoretical information of Tajweed, all the theoretical rules, knowing the rules and the terms and these things, the whole of the science like this, the ruling of this, is it, is it fardh, is it wajib, is it just mustahab, recommended, is it obligatory, is it, obviously it's not disliked. But, so the ruling here is fardh kifaya, something that is called fardh kifaya, which means communal obligation. That means that if some part of the ummah is fulfilling this role, then the responsibility is lifted from the rest. So not everyone has to do it, as long as some people are doing it from the ummah. But if no one does it, then everyone is held accountable. So this is what communal obligation refers to. And as for the application of Tajweed, this is fardh ayn, meaning individual obligation, meaning that any Muslim, any part of the Quran that he recites, for example, Surah Al-Fatiha, he needs to recite that in his prayers, and any small surahs after that. This, to be able to recite with Tajweed, regardless of whether he knows the theory or not, that to be able to apply the rules of Tajweed in his recitation, even if he doesn't know anything, he doesn't know what word ghunna is, he doesn't know what ikhfa is, he doesn't know what mad is, but to be able to apply it in whatever he knows of the Quran, whatever he recites of the Quran, this is fardh ayn. This is individual obligation, means an obligation upon every individual Muslim. Any parts of the Quran that he recites, that he knows, he needs to read in, he needs to recite them with application of Tajweed rules. So then we have the ways of learning this science. So there are two ways of learning this science. One of them is the way of the riwayah, and the other is the way of dirayah. The way of riwayah, and here we have two ways. So this is the original way that the Sahaba learned the Quran and passed it on to their students, the Tabi'een, and they passed it on to the Tabi'een. So this is the original way. And this is, under this, there are two ways to do this. And one is known as Arud, where the student recites to the teacher, and the teacher listens and corrects. And the other way is Talqeen, where the teacher recites to the student and the student listens and then recites after. Okay, so these are the two ways of the original way of riwayah, which is basically just orally learning and teaching. And the way of dirayah is basically studying the theory. So it's a combination. So it's studying the theory of Tajweed. So all the theory that developed, the terms, etc., that developed afterwards, such as the word, now all the words in Arabic that we have for the rules of Tajweed, these are actual Arabic words that are used in the language like normal. So they have literal meanings, but then they came to have a specialized meaning in the science of Tajweed. So with the specialized meanings, this is what we're talking about here. The study of the theoretical side of Tajweed is studying all the terms that are used in Tajweed with their specialized meanings. So for example, the word idgham, it literally just means to insert in the language, but in Tajweed has a specific meaning. It's talking about when you merge, for example, a letter into another letter, like the example of Nun Sakin and Tanween into a letter after them, from the letters of merging the letters of idgham, and so on. So studying all of this theory and then also reciting to a qualified teacher. This is the way of diraya. So a combination of both the rawaya way and diraya way is best, because, for example, if someone learns all the theory and they have everything documented, if they happen to forget something over the passage of time, they can always refer back to their rules and things that they studied. So next is the proofs of obligation of the Tajweed. So the proofs of the obligation of the Tajweed. We have from the Quran the ayah in Surah Al-Muzammil, verse 4, وَرَتِّلِ الْقُرْآنَ تَرْتِيلًا, and do tartil of the Quran, so recite the Quran with tartil. And this verb in Arabic, for those who are familiar with Arabic, is in the form of a command. And the general principle is in the Sharia is any time there is a command in the Quran and Sunnah, this means obligation. This means whatever is commanded is an obligation, unless there's some other proof to show that it's not the level of obligation. It's a level lesser than that, which would be recommendation. So when it comes to Tajweed and this verse, this is a proof of Tajweed being an obligation, that it's a command. And from the Sunnah, we have, for example, the hadith of Ibn Mas'ud, where, as the hadith that we mentioned earlier, where someone came and recited to him, إِنَّمَا الصَّدَقَاتُ لِلْفُقَرَاءِ وَالْمَسَاكِينِ, and he shortened the word where there should be a longer mad. Here he just said it with a short mad. Ibn Mas'ud, and this is basically how they would talk in the language, which is like a regular short mad. So Ibn Mas'ud said, no, this is not how the Prophet ﷺ taught in the Quran. And also when he demonstrated for him how the Prophet ﷺ taught the Quran to him, which was applying the rules of what we know now as Tajweed. إِنَّمَا الصَّدَقَاتُ لِلْفُقَرَاءِ وَالْمَسَاكِينِ. So he lengthened this mad extra long. So this is the proof from the Sunnah of the application of Tajweed being an obligation. This is how the Quran was recited by the Prophet ﷺ in this way, and he taught the Sahaba in this way, and they were made to recite in this way, and they taught their students to recite in this way. And then thirdly, we have ijma', consensus of the Ummah as well, upon the obligation of Tajweed, that the Quran should be recited with Tajweed. Okay, so the meaning of the word taratil. So it is the verbal noun of the verb rattala. So in Arabic, the verbal noun, we call it masdar. So it's the masdar or the verbal noun of rattala. So if you say someone rattala kalamahu, rattala his speech, it means he said his words one after the other slowly. Now, the noun rattal is from this meaning. And Arabs say, for example, if they refer to teeth and they say they are rattal, they are talking about teeth that are all separate and even. They're not, for example, twisted or some jutting out or others are going in or overcrowded and one's coming in front of the other or overlapping. No, they're all separately and even teeth, and this is what they refer to using the word rattal. And Allah saying, وَرَتِّلِ الْقُرْآنَ تَرْتِيلًا, Al-Muzammil, verse 4, is teaching his Prophet ﷺ. And as we know that when the Prophet ﷺ in general, when he's commanded something, the Ummah should also follow him in this as well. So Allah is commanding the Prophet ﷺ, teaching the Prophet ﷺ, and the Ummah should follow in this, to take time in recitation and to separate each letter from the next coming after, and not to rush and mix letters into each other. And this is how the Prophet ﷺ recited the Quran, and we have the various narrations, for example, of the Sahaba and his wives demonstrating how the Prophet ﷺ would recite, and he would recite slowly and take his time. And then we have mistakes. So mistakes and types of mistakes. So the word mistake is lahm, which is a singular word, and the plural of which is yuhul. Ibn Mujahid was one of the scholars of Quran, Qira'at, etc. He said there are two types of mistakes. So he's one of the early scholars we're referring to, one of the earliest scholars at the time of the era of the first generations. Okay, so he said that there are two types of mistakes in the Quran. Jelly is a mistake of i'rab, and Hafi is leaving out rights of letters from Tajweed of pronunciation. So we'll go into the words jelly and Hafi here to explain better what he's referring to. Linguistically, lahan means a grammar mistake. And in Tajweed and lahan, jelly, like even Mujahid mentioned, jelly is a mistake of i'rab. So in Tajweed, jelly and lahan, jelly is a clear mistake. For example, changing a haraka or a letter. So, for example, in Surah Al-Fatiha, instead of saying صِرَاطَ الَّذِينَ أَنْعَمْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ, which means you have blessed, you're talking to Allah. If, for example, said أَنْعَمْتُ, which would change the meaning. So this is a clear mistake. And another example is changing a letter. For example, saying a seam in the place of a sad, or saying a sad in the place of a sin, or any other letters. Changing a letter for another letter. And lahan hafi, or hidden mistake, is basically mistakes in the rules of tajweed. For example, leaving out a gunna, or leaving out making the longer mud into a shorter mud, etc. So examples of the whole. The lahan jali, we mentioned changing a letter, also changing a haraka, we gave examples of those. And other examples are doing sukoon of a mutaharrik, meaning there's a letter which has haraka and you say it with sukoon, or vice versa. Opposite, there's a letter with sukoon and you say it with haraka. Adding a mud where there's no mud. For example, the verb is qala, which means he said, and you say qala, which changes the meaning. Or omitting a basic mud. So, for example, the word qala is a basic two-kind mud here. You say qala, like that. Or, for example, removing a shadda where there's a shadda. Another example is adding a shadda where there's no shadda. Or adding extra letters or extra words, or omitting letters or words. So these are all examples of clear mistakes. And then we have lahan khafi, which is a hidden type of mistake, and that is, as we said, mistakes in tajweed, such as leaving out a ghunna, leaving out an extra mud. So it's not talking about the basic mud. If you leave out a basic mud, like the word ala, two-kind mud, you change the meaning completely. So that would be leaving out a letter, which is considered a lahan jali. But what we're referring to as lahan khafi would be leaving out an extra mud. So where the mud is extra long, you don't do the extra length, but you do come with the basic length. Okay, so the basic length, you won't change the meaning of the word, you're just leaving out a rule of tajweed. But if you removed even the basic length, then you would change the word altogether, which would go into the category of lahan jali, then the clear mistake. So the head hafi is leaving out the extra length of mad, which is the rule of tajweed. And the other examples are, for example, leaving out idgham and the like. And then we have levels of recitation. And under here, we have 3 levels of recitation, and they are at-tahfiq, which is the slowest type of recitation, which is the type of recitation used for learning and teaching. So when you hear the Quran, the recordings for tajweed or the mujawwid recordings, they are basically where the qari will be reciting in the level of tahfiq. And then we have the opposite of tahfiq, which is al-hada, which is the fast type of recitation. And that is the type of recitation which is used when, for example, doing review of the Quran, or, for example, when they do recitation of the Quran at Tarawih, when they're trying to get through the Quran like that. So it's a faster speed used for convenience in those types of situations. And then we have a speed, and this file. Then we have the level which is known as at-tadwir, which is between the two. Now, one important point is here is that all 3 levels, whether you're reciting with the slowest speed or the fastest or in between, every single level must always be applied with the rules of tajweed. So if you're reciting fast, you cannot, for example, recite fast and drop the rules of tajweed or drop letters. This is not allowed. Okay, so you are allowed to recite fast as long as you are still always applying the rules of tajweed. And we shall end here. inshallah. So the pillars of recitation we will cover next lesson, inshallah. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.